Chapter 98. Just as Yi-chan was lost in his thoughts, the elder looked at him and said, "If there is nothing else, can we go to the 9 bends and 18 bends to look for the lost ship? My granddaughter is still on the ship. It has been half a month. Although there is enough food on the ship, accidents are inevitable." Chu Ming stood up and said, "Don't worry, Grandpa, leave it to me. I will definitely bring Xianing back. Since there are people on the ship, let's go now." Yi-chan also stood up. The elder nodded and said, "I will go with you. The Ironwood ship is ready. On the northwest coast of Panshan Island. A 15 meters long and 3 meters wide black wooden ship was docked there. Its surface was glowing with a faint metallic luster. Yi-chan knew that this was the Ironwood ship. It was made of ironwood, which was comparable to metal. Needless to say, it was hard enough to withstand a full blow from a mortal realm warrior. It was also very flexible, able to move quickly in big waves without worrying about the hull breaking. "Master." 12 Mortal Realm Stage 9 warriors of the Chu family stood in a row and said in unison. The elder waved his hand and said, "You all know Chu Ming. This is the inner disciple of the Sky Cloud Martial School, Yi-chan. He will go with us to the 9 bends and 18 bends to rescue Xianing." After saying that, he turned to Yi-chan and Chu Ming and said, "They are not as strong as you two, but they are good swimmers. They can hold their breath underwater for 15 minutes. Yi-chan was a little surprised. With his current cultivation, holding his breath underwater for 15 minutes was not difficult, but these 12 people were only at Mortal Realm Stage 9. The closer they got to the 9 bends and 18 bends, the faster the current became. Waves after waves of water hit the side of the Ironwood ship, making loud banging sounds. Inside the cabin, the old man said, "The 9 bends and 18 bends are very complicated with countless whirlpools. Without exquisite rowing skills, it is impossible to pass through. If there are no accidents, this old man's granddaughter should be trapped in the first half of the 9 bends and 18 bends. There is a small mountain there, and the mountain and the lake have formed a flat beach for the boat to dock. What you need to do is very simple. Kill any demonic beasts that come close to prevent the boat from being pushed off course." Yi-chan said, "That's very simple. I can use my lightness skill to fly over, and I'll be able to find the lost ship and your granddaughter very quickly." The old man shook his head. The truly terrifying part of the 9 bends and 18 bends is not the flow of water or the demon beasts, but the thick fog. If one were to enter it alone, it would be very easy to get lost and not be able to come out for a lifetime. Only by following the changes in the flow of water would one be able to find a way out. "I see." Yi-chan nodded thoughtfully. Panshan Island and ancient water lake could not be treated with common sense. It was too strange. Creak. Suddenly, the Ironwood ship shook violently, as if it had been brushed by something. Dang dang dang. A martial artist of the Chu clan rushed in. "Clan head, 3 demon birds are approaching." The old man nodded. "Leave it to the 2 of them." Yi-chan and Chu Ming looked at each other and walked out of the cabin together. On the deck, Yi-chan looked up and saw 3 huge strange birds flying in the air. The strange birds had a wingspan of 5 meters, and the upper half of their wings had a pair of sharp claws. At this time they had not yet approached the Ironwood ship, but the wind caused by the flapping of their wings had caused the Ironwood ship to shake. Star finger, 7 stars of the Big Dipper. Chu Ming raised the index and middle fingers of his right hand, and at the end of his fingertips, a glazed brilliance appeared. He pointed 7 times in the air, and drew the pattern of the 7 stars of the Big Dipper. Poochie poochie poochie. Without any suspense, the 3 demon birds were shrouded by the 7 stars of the Big Dipper. Several bloody holes appeared on their bodies, and they fell into the lake. Yi-chan smiled and said, "Good finger technique. Insignificant skill." Chu Ming withdrew his hand. At this moment a Chu family martial artist shouted, "We have arrived at the 9 bends and 18 bends. Everyone hold on to the fixed objects, so as not to be thrown out of the deck." The voice fell, and in the blink of an eye, the hull of the ship suddenly swayed, and there was a tendency to capsize. The other Chu family martial artists were already prepared, and firmly held onto the things that they could hold onto. Only Yi-chan and Chu Ming were indifferent. Their feet firmly stepped on the deck, and no matter how fiercely the ship shook, it was difficult to shake their bodies. Chu Ming's body was very flexible, and his balance was also very good. He seemed to be motionless, but in fact, his body was secretly making subtle changes in the direction of the hull, and he could always take advantage of the situation. But when he looked at Yi-chan, his eyes could not help but narrow. Yi-chan stood with his hands behind his back, and his feet seemed to be rooted to the ground, swaying with the hull of the ship. It was as if he was a part of the hull, and there was no possibility of him being thrown out. What a brilliant qigong! Chu Ming's eyesight was very powerful, and he immediately saw that Yi Chen's attainments in qigong were very high, and his use of zhanqi was far beyond that of ordinary martial artists. Yi Chen faintly smiled and was about to speak, when he suddenly frowned and said, "There is a demon beast sneaking over from under the water." His figure jumped, and Yi Chen's body fell on the side of the ship's railing, and his fist with a shining blue light blasted down. Roar! The tiger's roar shook the sky, and the blue chi dragon swooped down, drilling into the bottom of the water. The next moment, the huge corpse of the demon beast floated up, and there was a bathtub-sized hole in its chest and abdomen, and blood was gurgling out. Chu Ming looked at the corpse of the demon beast, and was surprised. The water shadow beast is good at hiding its demon chi, and is proficient in stealth. How did you detect it? If it wasn't for Yi Chen's discovery, Chu Ming believed that it was impossible to kill the water shadow beast in advance. Only when the opponent launched an attack and exposed its demon chi, would he be able to detect it. At that time, even if the Ironwood ship was undamaged, it would definitely deviate from the course, and it would take a lot of effort to return to the normal route, which would undoubtedly waste a lot of time. Yi Chen naturally wouldn't say that his soul power was strong, and that he could freely explore anything around him, so he casually made up a reason and said, although the water shadow beast is proficient in stealth, and its demon chi is restrained, but with its huge body, it is difficult to sneak over without a sound, and it will inevitably change the water flow. Chu Ming secretly nodded. What Yi Chen said was right. The bigger the body, the greater the resistance in the water. But Yi Chen's perception was too strong, and he could even see the subtle changes in the water flow, which was really admirable. As they gradually went deeper into the 9 twists and 18 turns, the frequency of the hull shaking became faster and faster. Sometimes it was clearly swaying to the left, but suddenly it jumped up, and sometimes it was clearly stable without any waves. But the whirlpool under the water made it difficult for the hull to move. From fast speed to a sudden stop, it could almost make an ordinary person's heart jump out. Finally, the Ironwood ship arrived in front of the half-submerged mountain. On the beach, a large ship was docked there, and it seemed to be faintly discernible in the thick fog, and there was a dead silence. The ship had not yet approached, but Chu Ming and Yi Chen's feet touched the deck, and like two big birds, they flew over at an incredible speed. Papa! The two stood on the deck of the lost ship, and felt that the atmosphere had changed. Xianing, are you there? Chu Ming called out. Whoosh! Whoosh! Except for the lake wind, there was no other sound. The two were afraid of missing something, so they pushed open the cabin door and went in. After a moment, the two came out again. Yi Chen looked up at the mountain and said to Chu Ming, maybe they went to the mountain to take refuge. Chu Ming nodded. That's the only possibility. Let's wait for Big Grandpa first. Chapter 99. The Ironwood boat docked, and the old man came over with 12 people. Chu Ming said, Grandpa, Xianing is not up there. Not up there. The old man's face changed. He turned to the Chu warriors and said, you 12 people, for people in a group, divide into 3 groups and go up the mountain. Yes, Lord. The 12 Chu warriors formed their own groups and went up the mountain from 3 directions. At this time Yi Chen said, Lord Chu, you and Chu Ming in a group, I can go alone. That's it. The old man did not underestimate Yi Chen. Along the way, Yi Chen's strength was no less than Chu Ming, who was at the lake condensing reality realm. After they parted ways, Yi Chen followed the most remote path and flew up the mountain. On his way up the mountain, a poison water scorpion that loved water rushed towards him, but was easily smashed into pieces by his fist power. Liquid splashed everywhere, but he did not slow down at all. After a dozen breaths, he had disappeared into the depths of the mountain that was covered in thick fog. The fog silently parted, and a figure flashed like a ghost. Every time his feet touched the ground, he would slide dozens of meters away. His breath was long and pure. All of a sudden, the mountain near Yichan started to move. It was actually a giant rock beast with a rock-like outer shell. It opened its deep mouth, and an arm-thick red shadow flew out towards Yichan at lightning speed. Courting death. The hidden cloud sword was unsheathed, and the sharp sword light collided with the red shadow. Clang! The red shadow was cut open, and yellow-brown blood spurted out. Looking carefully, it turned out to be a 10-feet-long tongue. The root of the tongue was still in the mouth of the rock beast. It was like a frog sticking out its tongue. The beast wanted to use its tongue to roll Yichan into its mouth. It was really insidious. Missing its attack, the rock beast's body shrank back and squeezed into the mountain to avoid Yichan's counterattack. How could Yichan let it go? He stamped his foot on the ground and released his power. Bang! The rock beast was forcibly blown out. The sword chi flashed, and the giant rock beast with an extremely high defense fell to the ground. Its abdomen was cut open, and its internal organs and intestines rolled out. The strong earthy smell was extremely pungent. Not interested in dissecting the corpse of the giant rock beast, Yichan didn't even look back as he flashed into the thick fog. The mountain peak wasn't big, so Yichan quickly arrived at the mountainside. The first thing that came into view was a stone bridge. Beneath the stone bridge, clouds and mist tumbled. It was unfathomably deep. On the other side of the stone bridge, there was a large flat ground. Behind the flat ground, there was a large stone door. It was 33 feet tall and 28 feet wide. The door was tightly shut, revealing only a small gap. Light shone out from inside, changing the color of the mist. There's someone inside. Yichan hesitated for a moment before stepping onto the stone bridge. Kalala! Inconceivably, the stone beasts on both sides of the stone bridge came to life. They broke free from the stone surface and rushed towards Yichan step by step. Mountain range stacking. Facing the many stone beasts, Yichan used the lone peak of 13 swords attack range, the mountain range stacking. With a wave of his sword, layers of sword light spread out. Cha-cha-cha one by one. The stone beasts were chopped into pieces and scattered all over the ground. Just as he was about to leave, Yichan discovered an amazing scene. The broken pieces of the stone beasts twisted a few times, turned into mist and blended into the surrounding environment, leaving no traces behind. Strange, this was really strange. Yichan's eyes flashed. No one knew what he was thinking. Moments later, Yichan took a deep breath, carried his sword and rushed towards the stone door. The stone door was really thick. Yichan estimated that even if he could break it, it might cause the stone room inside to collapse. It was not a wise move. Gathering 20,000 pounds of strength in both of his arms, Yichan inserted both of his hands into the gap in the middle of the stone door and tried to pull it to both sides. Rumble! The stone door slowly opened, and a brightly lit hall appeared in front of Yichan. Compared to the outside, the hall inside was luxurious enough. On both sides of the hall, there were 18 gold-painted stone pillars. They were 26 meters tall, smooth and without any carvings. In the middle of the hall, there was a red carpet, which extended all the way to the main seat of the hall. A middle-aged man was sitting on the main seat. His eyes were slightly closed, and his aura was like a mountain. On both sides of the red carpet, there were 6 other middle-aged men. Although their auras were not as powerful as the middle-aged man, they were still not to be underestimated. They were at least at the peak of late condensing reality realm. Who are you? The middle-aged man on the main seat opened his eyes, which were shining like lightning. He was obviously a clasping Yuan realm warrior. Yichan cupped his fists and said, I am here to look for someone. I wonder if you have seen a young girl coming here? The middle-aged man on the main seat said lightly, Come in and have a seat. Yes. Yichan felt that something was wrong, but he could not tell what it was. He followed the order and sat on the last seat on the right side of the red carpet. An evil look flashed through his eyes. The middle-aged man waved his hand at the stone door, and the stone door slowly closed. The young girl you are talking about is 15 or 16 years old and clean? Yichan had already learned about his granddaughter's appearance and temperament from the elder. He nodded and said, Indeed, have you seen her before? Yes, she was trapped at the foot of the mountain. I saved her. She is now in the side room. You can take her and leave now. The middle-aged man seemed to be easy to talk to. With a suspicious look in his eyes, Yichan asked to confirm, I can take her and leave? What? You don't want to take her? Oh no. Yi-chan stood up and walked towards the side room of the hall unhurriedly. He pushed his soul power to its limit, just in case something unexpected happened. However, things were very strange. Not only did the middle-aged man on the main seat not move, even the other 6 middle-aged men on the side seemed to have their acupuncture points sealed. They sat there without moving or talking. There was only some meat on the table, which had not been eaten at all. A strange atmosphere filled the whole hall. When he reached the door of the side room, Yi-chan suddenly turned around and looked at the middle-aged man. The evil look in the middle-aged man's eyes quickly disappeared. He asked, "What now?" "Nothing, I just think it's funny." Yi-chan pulled out his sword and sneered. "Huh," the middle-aged man said with a gloomy face. "I have already given you enough face by letting you take the young girl away. Do you want to fight me? You are only a condensing reality realm warrior. I can easily kill you." Yi-chan said with a faint smile, "Really? If you can kill me, why would you lie to me? If I am not wrong, once you enter the side room you will die. How dare you? Get the hell in here." The middle-aged man waved his hand, and a golden stone pillar fell from the ground. Without any hesitation, it shot towards Yi-chan, who was not far away. It created a thunderous sound in the air, which was unstoppable. After all, this stone pillar was 66 feet long and half a meter thick. With the help of a clasping Yuan realm warrior's Shan-Chi, it was more powerful than any weapon. It could easily pierce through a mountain and kill a late condensing reality realm warrior. At this moment, if it was an ordinary warrior, he would definitely retreat into the side room to avoid the attack of the stone pillar. However, Yi-chan was not one of them. His eyes were clear, and he did not intend to dodge at all. He held the hidden cloud sword in his right hand and pointed it at the terrifying stone pillar. Crack! The stone pillar shattered into pieces, turning into mist and dissipating. Chapter 100. Mountain Condensing Sword Chi. After breaking the stone pillar, Yi-chen's eyes flickered with a cold light. He waved a half-moon-shaped sword Chi towards the middle-aged man. Puff! The middle-aged man did not expect that Yi-chan would not retreat or dodge. Instead, he attacked him after breaking the stone pillar. Before he could react, the sword Chi landed on his body. The mist rolled, and the shape of the middle-aged chief changed rapidly. He turned from a human into a lizard-like monster, with 4 dark red sarcomas on his head. It was extremely disgusting. It opened its big mouth, and everything in the hall turned into mist and was swallowed into its stomach. Yi-chan looked around. This was not a luxurious hall at all, it was a dirty stone cave. The 6 middle-aged men, who were neither smiling nor talking, were just skeletons sitting there. The color of their bones had turned black. In addition, there were a lot of white bones piled up on the ground, extending all the way to the main seat. It was the red carpet they had seen before. Looking back, the side room was also a stone cave. It was a few meters in size and there was a huge pit at the bottom. The pit was filled with a gray liquid, and sticky bubbles were rising from it. When the bubbles burst, the air that was stored in the liquid touched the cave wall and corroded it, leaving a large area of black marks. Although he knew that everything before was just an illusion, Yi-chan still could not help but gasp. If he had not noticed it in advance, he would have stepped into the gray liquid and died. What was more horrifying was that if he had guessed it right, this lizard-like monster should be a rare Shen beast on the True Spirit continent. It liked to suck people's brains and turn their memories into its own. Then it would refine a kind of Shen Qi according to the memories in its mind and arrange a vivid illusion, making it hard for people to tell which was real and which was fake. Shen beasts were demonic beasts that could evolve. According to the number of sarcomas on their heads, their strength could be distinguished. One sarcoma-like demonic beast was a rank 1 beast, 2 were rank 2, and 4 were rank 4 beasts. However, Yi-chan was not afraid of it. Among the demonic beasts of the same level, Shen beasts were the weakest kind, so there was nothing to be afraid of. Where is the girl? Yi-chan stared at the Shen beast. The Shen beast growled, its small eyes filled with malice. Yi-chan frowned and remembered that the sea serpent could not speak. Only in the illusion did people think that it could speak. In fact, it had not spoken from the beginning to the end. Everything was based on the atmosphere and its own imagination. Since that's the case, there's no need for you to stay. The previous sword strike had already injured the sea serpent, causing it to lose control of the sea serpent chi. Yi-chan was not afraid that it would use the sea serpent chi again. He stamped his feet and released his hidden force. Immediately, 3 sword chi flew out in a triangular formation. Boom! The sea serpent flew high in the air under the explosion of the hidden force, and forcibly withstood the 3 sword chi. Fiercely hitting the cave wall, the sea serpent suddenly opened its mouth and spat out a wisp of fog. This wisp of fog turned into a ball of fire in the air, burning towards Yi-chan. Watch me destroy your mirage. Yi-chan didn't dare to face the fire directly. He was afraid that it might be a trap. He switched the hidden cloud sword to his left hand and launched the first style of the Tyrant Fist, Tyrannical Rampage. All of a sudden, the fire was integrated into the sword and rushed towards the sea serpent. A horrifying scream sounded. There was a bloody hole in the chest and abdomen of the sea serpent. The edge of the bloody hole was pitch black, and a disgusting burnt smell spread out, making people want to vomit. It's really a trap. The Tyrant Fist itself had no attribute, but it could be integrated into the opponent's attack. At this time, the sea serpent was clearly suffering from its own actions. However, Yi-chan didn't know that the sea serpent's mirage contained 5 elements of Yuan Qi. Fire Yuan Qi was one of them. That fire was the essence of the fire in its body. It was very difficult to condense it again. Just now it was afraid that it couldn't kill Yi-chan, so it used the sea serpent chi to cover up the existence of the fire. Then, it took back the sea serpent chi, which was easy to give people the illusion that it was an illusion. As long as Yi-chan was not careful, there was a high possibility that he would fail miserably. The intelligence of this monster was not inferior to that of humans. In terms of insidiousness and cunning, most humans were no match for it. Yi-chan's pupils shrank, and his heart was filled with killing intent. This sea serpent must not be left alive, otherwise, there would be endless disasters. Die! With a low shout, Yi-chan threw out a punch and a sword at the same time. Crack! Bang! Like a broken sack, the sea serpent collapsed on the ground, motionless. However, Yi-chan was afraid that it was not enough, so he continued to attack until the sea serpent was no longer in its beast form. Walking to the corpse of the sea serpent, Yi-chan reached out his hand and a fist-sized inner pellet was sucked out. The surface of the inner pellet was white, and there was a mist overflowing from it. Just looking at it would easily make people hallucinate. Taking out a slightly larger jade box from his storage ring, Yi-chan put the inner pellet into it. Putting away the jade box, Yi-chan let out a sigh of relief. He looked around hoping to find some clues. Previously, in the illusion, the sea serpent had described the characteristics of the granddaughter of the elder, so he should have seen her before. He wondered if she was in danger or not. If she was in danger, there was nothing he could do. After all, it had been too long. The sea serpent was not a herbivorous monster. It specialized in sucking human brains. Something was not right. Yi-chan suddenly shook his head. The sea serpent could not speak, so everything that happened in the illusion did not count. But how did it know the characteristics of the granddaughter of the elder? Could it be that those were my own memories? The sea serpent made me hallucinate and said the answers I wanted to know. In other words, no matter who it was, as long as they were in the illusion, there would not be any loopholes in their words, because the questions I wanted to ask have already been answered. With a bitter smile, Yi-chan had to admit defeat to the sea serpent. If it were not for the fact that he had doubts in his heart and his unusually strong soul power, he would have been tricked by the sea serpent. After a careful search and finding no clues, Yi-chan immediately walked out of the cave. Outside the cave, the ground was a wasteland full of weeds. The stone bridge was just a fallen boulder. As for the gully, it was real, and below it was a lake. Following the way he came, Yi-chan went down the mountain. After a while, the lost ship appeared in front of him. There were more than 10 people standing there, including a girl in a yellow dress. The girl was beautiful and had a clean temperament. If he was not mistaken, the girl was the granddaughter of the old man, Chu Xining. Young hero Yi, my granddaughter has been found. The old man smiled. Yi-chan touched his nose. That's good. Chu Ming asked, nothing happened on your side, right? No, nothing happened. Yi-chan did not intend to complicate matters. Anyway, the purpose of the other party was to find Chu Xining, so there was no need to mention the sea serpent. That's good, let's go back. It's getting late. The old man nodded. The lost ship was abandoned in place. Everyone boarded the ironwood ship and sailed along the route they came from. On the way back, the number of demon beasts did not decrease, but because it was close to evening, it became more dangerous. Fortunately, Yi-chan and Chu-ming protected the ironwood ship and did not let it deviate from the route. When the last ray of sunlight faded, everyone had already returned to Panshan Island. It was a quiet night. The next morning, Yi-chan said goodbye to everyone. As for Chu-ming, it was rare for him to come back, so he planned to stay for a few more days. After all, the curse of Panshan Island generally occurred between the second and third month. There was no danger in the first and second month, and Chu-ming had only been back for a day. On the ancient water lake, the water was sparkling. A person stepped on a tree trunk and rushed forward. In June, the inner disciple ranking competition will be held. I wonder what kind of powerful characters will be among the top 10 inner disciples. Yi-chen's white robe fluttered in the wind. While looking at the lake scenery, he was thinking. Chapter 101. Half a day later, Yi-chen came back to the shore. What happened next made him speechless. The owner and the waiter of the ancient water lake had disappeared without a trace. As for his and Chu-ming's horses, of course, they were gone too. Both of them were riding on dark brown horses. Each horse was worth more than 60,000 silvers, which added up to 120,000 silvers, which was enough for an ordinary person to live comfortably for 10 lifetimes. If they didn't want to live an ordinary life, they could by a small manner become a master, and have 3 wives and 4 concubines and countless maids. In short, if there were no disasters in this life, they could have everything. I hope you guys are always lucky and don't run into me again. Yi-chan didn't care about a dark brown horse, but he hated people who took advantage of others. If he ran into them, he wouldn't mind sending them to jail for the rest of their lives. With a flash, Yi-chan flew away on foot. In the ancient spring town. In the Flower Fairy restaurant. The owner of the restaurant was a beautiful young woman, who was not even 25 years old. Her husband was a famous sword artist in the surrounding area, and she herself was a late-condensing reality realm warrior, who was known as the Flower Fairy. Ever since she started running the restaurant, her business had been booming, and she was not any less famous than her husband. On the second floor of the restaurant, a lot of martial artists were sitting there, drinking and chatting. From time to time, they would flirt with the lady boss. "Lady boss, your husband hasn't fought for a few years. I wonder how good his sword art is now?" Someone used her husband's name to talk to the Flower Fairy. The Flower Fairy said with a faint smile, "I'm not sure about this, but according to him, he can cut the Golden Water River in half with one sword attack." Cut the Golden Water River in half with one sword attack? These martial artists looked at each other. The Golden Water River was a big river near the ancient spring town. The widest part was hundreds of meters, and the narrowest part was also hundreds of meters. Even if he cut the narrowest part with one sword attack, it would still be a big deal. In addition to his powerful sword art, his cultivation was at least at the peak of early clasping Yuan realm, or even mid-clasping Yuan realm. The Flower Fairy took in everyone's expressions and nodded in satisfaction. Ever since she came to the Blossom Immortal restaurant, countless people had drooled over her beauty. If it wasn't for her husband's fame and strength, there would have been people who would have tried to snatch her away. It was necessary to teach them a lesson. You found a good husband. Reaching such a realm at the age of 26 is enough to be mentioned in the same breath as the disciples of the sections. No. As the Flower Fairy spoke, her gaze landed on the seat next to the window. There sat a young man in a white robe. His features were delicate and handsome. At this moment someone said, "June is almost here. The Sky Cloud Martial School's Inner Disciple competition is about to begin. To be honest, I would like to go and have a look. I want to see it too. Too bad no one invited me." Invite you? Dream on. Even some clasping Yuan realm martial artists weren't invited, not to mention you. Unless you are a relative of one of the Sky Cloud Martial School's inner elders, that would be quite possible. I'm just saying. By the way, Flower Fairy, has your husband been invited? The Flower Fairy nodded. The invitation letter arrived 10 days ago, but my husband is currently in seclusion, so I don't know if he can make it in time. Her husband's name was Song Qingyun, known as the Blue Cloud Sword Artist. He reached the clasping Yuan realm at the age of 21. His sword art was extremely sharp, and he was quite famous in the Windy Nation. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been invited by the Sky Cloud Martial School to watch the Inner Disciple competition. TSK. It's a great honor to be invited by the Sky Cloud Martial School. But with the reputation of the Blue Cloud sword artist, it's normal for him to be invited. In our area, besides the Blue Cloud sword artist, only that old kidnapper and the 5 mountain master Pei Zhongli have been invited. Pei Zhongli, isn't that the father of Pei Shaoqing, one of the top 10 inner disciples of the Sky Cloud Martial School? Yes, the Pei family is the #1 family within hundreds of miles, and that Pei Shaoqing is also very good. He became an outer disciple at the age of 12 and inner disciple at 13, and now he is only 16, but he is already one of the top 10 inner disciples of the Sky Cloud Martial School, ranked in the top 5. Pei Shaoqing, this kid is indeed very good. But don't be fooled by his friendly attitude. He is not friendly when fighting, he is very cruel. If there are no accidents, this kid has the possibility to be in the top 3, maybe he can even fight for the first place. Not necessarily. Pei Shaoqing's good friend Ghost Sword Li Kuang should not be underestimated either. I heard that he had obtained a low-rank Earth Realm sword art 2 years ago. Even if he had only comprehended 60 to 70% of it, it would still be enough for him to look down on the others. Ghost Sword Li Kuang. The ears of the teenager in the white robe twitched slightly. He could clearly hear everyone's conversation. He did not care much about Pei Shaoqing, but he was interested in Ghost Sword Li Kuang. He had heard of this person before. He had a unique understanding of sword art since he was young. His sword art was unpredictable. It was completely different from the normal sword arts. Therefore, he had never practiced the sword arts of the Sky Cloud Martial School until one day, when he accidentally obtained the inheritance of a deceased senior and learned a low-rank Earth Realm sword art 9 Ghost Shadow Swords. With this sword art, his reputation skyrocketed, and he earned the title of Ghost Sword in the martial world. He could be considered as the #1 sword artist among the top 10 inner disciples. The handsome teenager was Yi Chun. After he lost his dark brown horse, his speed did not decrease, instead it increased. He could travel more than 3,000 miles in a day, and this was because he was afraid that he would lose too much Zhen Qi, so he would rest for a while. The ancient spring town happened to be on his route, so he came to the Flower Fairy restaurant to rest. I have already touched the edge of the sword intent, but unfortunately, the lone peak of 13 swords is not that high ranked, so I am still at a disadvantage. I wonder what kind of rewards I will get from the inner disciple ranking competition? Yi Chen's strongest sword art was still the Tyrant Fist. Although the lone peak of 13 swords had the advantage of sword qi, it was still not as good as the Ghost Sword Li Kuang. As for Pei Shaoqing, it seemed that he was more famous than the Ghost Sword, but Yi Chun was more interested in people who use swords. The Ghost Sword is nothing. Among the top 10 inner disciples, who can compete with the Blood Shadow Sword Meng Chong? He is the only disciple in the Sky Cloud Martial School who has completed the 1,000 kill. Even the core disciples could not do it. I am afraid that this year he will not only be the #1 inner disciple, but he will also challenge the other core disciples. With his sword art, it should not be a problem for him to be in the top 15. That's true. Meng Chong's status as the #1 inner disciple is undeniable. The others can only compete for the 2nd to 10th place. Maybe there will be even more outstanding inner disciples who will compete with the top 10 inner disciples. It will be very intense. I will go find my brother-in-law tomorrow and ask for an invitation. He has a good relationship with one of the inner elders of the Sky Cloud Martial School, so there should be a chance. My cousin's teacher used to be in the Sky Cloud Martial School. I wonder if he can bring me. Everyone's heart was itching for an invitation. They could not wait to have an invitation right in front of them. At this time, Yi Chun had already finished his lunch. He threw down a silver ingot that weighed 10 silvers, stood up and walked through the crowd, heading downstairs. A Jianghu man accidentally saw the cloud pattern on Yi Chen's sleeve and said in a low voice, "I did not expect there to be an inner disciple of the Sky Cloud Martial School here. What a mistake." There were a lot of people in the Jianghu who wore white robes. Plus, Yi Chun had been traveling day and night for the past few days, so his robes were covered with dust. It did not look that eye-catching, so it did not attract much attention. Now that someone mentioned it, everyone realized that Yi Chan was indeed an inner disciple of the Sky Cloud Martial School. The flower fairy secretly smiled. She had already known about Yi Chen's identity, but seeing that he was only at the mid-condensing reality realm, she was afraid that it would not be possible for him to compete for the top 10 inner disciples. Of course, whether it was possible or not, she would find out when she went with her husband. She hoped that her husband would come out soon. Chapter 102. Being on the road for a couple of days was not without its benefits. At least, Yi Chan felt that his Zhen-Qi had become a lot purer and easier to use. Of course, people who did not have a strong enough soul power would not be able to notice the subtle changes. After returning to the floating cloud palace, Yi Chan walked to the ranking wall. There was basically no change in the ranking this month. The ranking was still the same. As for why, it was very simple. Everyone was focused on the competition that was going to start in June. There was no need to work so hard right now. It would be more suitable to wait until the competition to amaze the world. Looking at the bottom, Yi Chan smiled. He was ranked last, and the few people who were in the same batch as him were all in the top row. Alright, I should take advantage of this competition to become one of the top 10 inner disciples, so that I won't have to challenge other people in the future. Yi Chan did not really care about the ranking in front of him. In the competition, everything was fair. You would not get any special treatment just because you had a high ranking. But right now, the most important thing for him was training. The mid-condensing reality realm was too low. He had to at least reach the peak of the mid-condensing reality realm. Then, he would not have to be afraid of anyone among the inner disciples. At night, Yi Chan sat down to cultivate. In the morning, Yi Chan sat on the cliff, training his sword intent. At noon, Yi Chan would go to the pool under the waterfall to train his body. As the days passed, it was getting closer and closer to June. Deep in the mountains behind the Windy Mountain, next to the Rock Mountain, a burly young man with a height of 2 meters and a naked upper body stood there. His eyes were like lightning, and his muscles were bulging. His terrifying aura was even stronger than a beast of the same level. Anyone who was stared at by him would feel as if they were facing an ancient beast, and they would tremble in fear. Roar! The muscular young man opened his mouth and roared. The muscles on his upper body shook like a mountain. His bones also made a sound like a bow being pulled, as if dozens of people were shooting arrows at the same time. The ground cracked under his stomp. The muscular young man opened his arms and slammed into the rock mountain. Rumble! The 20 meters tall, 6 to 7 meters thick rock mountain was broken into pieces. Huge rocks that were as tall as a human flew in all directions. His face did not even blush. The muscular young man mumbled to himself, "The competition is about to start. I Xiao Yi will not be willing to be ranked below others. I will definitely fight for the first place. Once I become the number 1 inner disciple, I will challenge Su Jing and see who is the strongest in the Sky Cloud Martial School." There were 36 mountains in the Sky Cloud Martial School, which were specially prepared for the inner masters to train. There were 36 mountains in the Sky Cloud Martial School. The white-robed elder said to the youth beside him, "Li Yun, as soon as you were promoted to an inner disciple, you became my disciple. In these 3 years, you have never gone out to do any missions or participate in the ranking competition. You have been concentrating on your cultivation, but this time, you must participate in the ranking competition. Otherwise, the sect leader and the other elders will think that I am delaying you and not giving you enough opportunities to train." The young man's expression was grave and stern as he said, "Master, don't worry. I will let others know that even if I have never been in Jianghu, I can still defeat other disciples." The white-robed elder shook his head. "Don't look down on others. Although your strength is enough to be in the top 5 of the inner disciples, it is still a bit dangerous to fight for the top 3. As far as I know, Ghost Sword Li Kuang and Pei Xiaoqing both have the strength to be in the top 3. As for that Blood Shadow Blade Meng Chong, his fighting strength is so strong that even I, as an inner elder, am a bit surprised. I'm afraid you are still not his match." The cold-looking youth said, "Master, didn't you tell me that if I want to fight, I should fight for first place? Otherwise, everything else is meaningless." That's what I've said. Then do your best to fight for the first place. If I'm not mistaken, your biggest opponent will be the Blood Shadow Blade, Meng Chong, and your second opponent will be the Ghost Sword, Li Kuang. His sword art is unpredictable. unlike the Sky Cloud Martial School. You must be careful when you meet him, don't lose to him in sword art. In terms of sword art, I will not lose to anyone. The white-robed elder nodded. Not to mention other things in terms of sword art, there were not many people in the Sky Cloud Martial School who could compete with his disciple. After all, after 3 years of hard work, the young man already had his own style of sword art. If he was given time, he might not lose to the #1 disciple of the Sky Cloud Martial School. Hidden Fragrance Sword Zhu Mei. Alright, 3 months of closed-door training, let me see your current strength. Ding! The sword came out of the scabbard, and the cold-looking youth waved his sword towards the sea of clouds. Silently, 13 sword marks appeared in the sea of clouds. Each sword mark was the same length, and there was almost no difference between them. It was as if they were all copies of the same sword mark. The white-robed elder's eyes flashed with a surprised look. 14 sword lights. I can't believe that your sword light has reached the highest level. If someone was here, they would definitely be confused. There were 13 sword marks in the sea of clouds. Why were there 14 sword lights? Black Dragon River, Sunflower Water Tributary. In the last 3 months, a new small gang was established here, called the Sunflower Water Stronghold. The Sunflower Water Stronghold had 3 leaders, all of whom were at the peak of the condensing reality realm. Among them, the head leader had already touched the edge of the clasping Yuan realm, and would only need 1 or 2 months to become a clasping Yuan realm warrior. In addition, the Sunflower Water Stronghold also had 7 or 8 late condensing reality realm warriors, more than 20 mid condensing reality realm warriors, and 40 to 50 early condensing reality realm warriors. As for the mortal realm warriors, they were basically cannon fodder, and there were also hundreds of them. The outer gate of the Sunflower Water Stronghold was split in half with a bang, and an arrogant and wild young man walked in with big steps. People of the Sunflower Water Stronghold, come out and die. Whoosh! There were at least 100 Stronghold members surrounding the young man, and then there were dozens of elite Stronghold members, all of whom were condensing reality realm warriors. Looking for death, you dare to accept the mission to destroy my Sunflower Water Stronghold. Kill him. With a command, the tall and sturdy young man was immediately drowned in the sea of people, and his figure could not be seen. Ha 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 ha. All of you die. The blood-red blade light crisscrossed in the sea of people, and everywhere it went, there would be dozens of people's bodies cut open, and blood splattered everywhere. There was simply no one who could withstand a single attack, no, not even a single attack, because even the condensing reality realm elite stronghold members could not block half of the power of the tall and sturdy young man's blade. How can he be so terrifying? Who is he? I know, he is the Sky Cloud Martial School's Blood Shadow Blade Ming Chong. Run quickly. Someone saw something from the tall and sturdy young man's blade art, and his face was full of fear. Slaughter the common people, die for me. The tall and sturdy young man laughed arrogantly, and the murderous intent in his laughter soared into the sky. Soon after, a mournful and terrifying blood-red blade light flashed, and every time the blade fell, there would be at least 10 people dead, and the ground would be cut open with a hideous blade mark. Blood flowed like a river, and the people of the Sunflower Water Stronghold were almost all killed. At this moment, another 3 people rushed over. They were the 3 leaders of the Sunflower Water Stronghold. The third leader's weapon was a pair of Xian flower axes, the second leader's weapon was the eyebrow staff, and the head leader's weapon was a tiger-headed blade, which was the most powerful. The tall and sturdy young man rushed out from the corpses, and slashed at the 3 people. Poochie! 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 The 3 peak condensing reality realm warriors were instantly dismembered by this blade, and the blood-red blade light pierced through their bodies, and a huge gap appeared in the main hall of the Sunflower Water Stronghold. So weak, so boring. The tall and sturdy young man shook his head and turned to leave. The moon-white robe on his body was not stained with a trace of blood. Chapter 103. There was a huge rock in the pool under the waterfall. Yi-chan sat down with his legs crossed, with the hidden cloud sword and its sheath on his knees. He had entered into a mysterious and ethereal state. The rumbling sound of the waterfall did not affect Yi-chan at all. In his perception, the world was no longer the same. The sound had completely disappeared, and the waterfall was falling slower and slower. In the end, the waterfall even started to move slowly. From time to time, a few water droplets would fly out of the waterfall. Under the sunlight, the water droplets would shine with a colorful light, like the brightest crystal. When he sensed that the waterfall had completely stopped, he opened his cold eyes. He pulled out his sword and waved it. All of his movements were done in one go, without any hesitation. Without a sound, the waterfall on the other side split into two and fell down in two, unable to connect with each other. Boom! Boom! Two loud booms came out, and the water splashed everywhere. I'm still half a step away from the sword intent. Unfortunately, this half step is the most difficult, and it will take a long time to train. Just now, Yi-chan had almost grasped the existence of the sword intent. Unfortunately, it was still a bit mysterious, and could only be counted as the half-step sword intent. There was still a slight gap between it and the real sword intent. As he let out a breath, Yi-chan slowly stood up. His body shook slightly, and the half-step sword intent immediately disappeared, making it hard for others to notice. After enjoying the scenery for a while, Yi-chan went back the way he came. Outside the yard, Wu Zongming saw Yi-chan coming back. He smiled and said, "It's not easy to find you." Yi-chan said, "There are only 3 days left until the inner disciple ranking competition. I want to improve my strength as soon as possible." "You're not planning to become one of the top 10 inner disciples, are you?" "More or less." Wu Zongming's eyes widened. "Really? The top 10 inner disciples are almost as powerful as core disciples. Some of them are even qualified to become core disciples. Most importantly, almost all of them are at the late condensing reality realm, and they have the power to kill normal warriors at the same level as them." The top 10 inner disciples were the most elite group of the inner disciples. Each of them had a combination of talent, perception, and willpower. They might not be as good as the core disciples, but as long as they were given enough time, who knew how far they could go? So for the sect, the top 10 inner disciples and the core disciples were equally important, and they would not be ignored just because of a temporary gap in strength. Yi-chan shook his head and said with a smile, "When did you lose your ambition? Aren't you just one of the top 10 inner court disciples? I heard that every year, a few people would be eliminated and new faces would appear." Wu Zongming opened his mouth but couldn't say a word. He felt that he was indeed a bit lacking in ambition. When Yi-chan was still at Mortal Realm Stage 6, he dared to fight against Zhang Haoren, who was at the peak of Mortal Realm Stage 10. Now that he was already at the mid-condensing reality realm, why couldn't he replace the others and become one of the top 10 inner disciples? Not necessarily. You are right. I used to be the number 1 outer disciple, so I didn't feel too much pressure. But after I became an inner disciple, I was surrounded by the best of the best. With my talent and power, it was nothing at all. That's why I had been hiding my true thoughts, and planned to move up step by step. I didn't have to be so aggressive. Now that you have said it, I finally understand why the gap between me and Zhang Haoren has been increasing. It is because I have lost my courage and determination, and started to become an ordinary inner disciple. If Wu Zongming had not been with Yi-chan, he would not have realized this. But he had seen the changes in Yi-chan, and he felt that it was not a coincidence that Yi-chan could succeed, and it was worth thinking about. The joy of reaching the mid-condensing reality realm after taking the Zhanqi pellet had disappeared. Wu Zongming sighed. What a sudden awakening! I thought that the Zhanqi pellet would be able to shorten the gap between us. But now it seems that the gap is getting bigger and bigger. At least I am not as determined as you. Yi-chan opened the door and invited him in. He said while walking, actually talent is just like a stepping stone. It can give you a higher starting point than others. But if you want to keep improving, talent alone is not enough. You need to understand your own path and walk your own path. Wu Zongming forced a smile. The path and the path are still too far for me. I really don't know what level you have reached. Alright, why did you want to see me? Yi-chan asked. Wu Zongming patted his head. I almost forgot. The ranking competition will be held in 3 days. We need to go and draw lots now. Draw lots now? Yeah. Except for the top 10 inner disciples, everyone else has to draw lots and register their names. Otherwise, it would be troublesome to do it on the day of the competition. That's true. Let's go together then. On the way, Yi-chan learned that the inner disciple ranking competition was divided into 10 groups, and each group had about 50 people. In each group, there would be one of the top 10 inner disciples, which was equivalent to a seeded contestant. The group competition would have 10 rounds, and the top 3 would have the right to go to the finals to compete for this year's top 10 inner disciple title. The others would be ranked according to the number of battles they had won. On the martial field, a big lottery box was placed there. There were 2 registrars next to it. Right now, there were already a lot of inner disciples drawing lots. Damn, so unlucky. How did I end up in Ghost Sword Li Kuang's group? You call that unlucky? My group is Blood Shadow Blade Ming Chong. Who can beat him? I have no choice but to give up if I meet him. Yi Chun was confused. He stood at the back of the line. Soon it was his turn. He reached his hand into the lottery box and took out a thin wooden card. On it was written Group 7 number 28. Group seated contestant. Feng Ping. On the side, the registrar wrote down Yi Chen's name and the number of his group. After drawing lots, the 2 left the crowd. Wu Zongming asked, "Which group are you in? Who is the seated contestant?" Group 5. The seated contestant is Feng Ping. Flying Wind Feng Ping. Wu Zongming was dazed for a second and said, "He is ranked 6th among the top 10 inner disciples. His light body technique is ridiculously good. It is said that he can fly in the wind as if he is weightless. He is one of the more difficult ones to deal with. Luckily it was not me. Otherwise, I wouldn't even be able to touch his clothes. Ridiculously good light body technique." Yi Chun was interested. To him, light body technique was also one of his advantages. He wondered how it would compare with Flying Wind Feng Ping. As for Wu Zongming, he was in Group 3. The seated contestant was called Xiao Yi. He was ranked 3rd among the top 10 inner disciples. He was even higher than Pei Xiaoqing and Ghost Sword Li Kuang. He was a dual cultivator. His defense and attack were terrifyingly high. After leaving the martial field, the 2 went their separate ways. The 3rd day, on the night before the ranking competition, Yi Chun had finally reached the peak of the mid-condensing reality realm. His Zhen Qi was more than 30% stronger than before. At the same time, his pure Jun Zhen Qi had also reached the peak of the 7th stage. His Qi swords were almost solid, they were even more powerful than the sword light. Now everything was ready. He just had to wait for the ranking competition to start the next day. Chapter 104. Dong! 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 Early in the morning, the sound of a bell came from the martial field of the Windy Mountain, wave after wave, spreading out for dozens of miles. On the mountain road, people from all over the world had gathered. Among these people there were leaders of small martial institutions, leaders of big families, head guards of escort agencies, leaders of gangs, business leaders, city leaders of nearby cities, and some famous martial artists. "Leader Liu, you are here too." "Of course I am. The Sky Cloud Martial School is the biggest martial institution within tens of thousands of miles. Our small martial institutions cannot compete with them at all. So this time I brought a few of my best disciples to watch the battles, hoping to inspire them. I also brought 2 young martial artists from the business, to show them what true geniuses are, so they don't get into trouble everywhere." Same here. These people did not usually interact with each other, but they still knew each other. They walked together in groups of 3 to 5, talking and laughing. At this time it was obvious who had more power and who was more powerful, because only the powerful ones could make others surround them, not the other way around. In the inner disciple area, Yi Chun casually closed the door of his courtyard and started to walk towards the noisy martial plaza. So many people. Arriving at the martial field, Yi Chun was a little surprised. Last year, because he was beaten by Wang Gang, he was bedridden for a month, and missed the opportunity to watch the ranking competition. He had never seen such a spectacular scene of tens of thousands of people gathered in one place. There were 10 huge platforms in the martial field. Each of them was round and 3 meters tall, and combined with the other platforms to form a flower pattern, it was very beautiful. The 10 platforms were surrounded by a circle of VIP seats, and above the VIP seats were the audience seats. From afar, the entire martial field looked like an iron pot. The bottom of the iron pot was the battle site, and the 4 sides of the iron pot were the seats for the audience. Yi Chun, over here. In the open space between the platform and the VIP seats, a large group of inner disciples stood there. Wu Zongming waved at Yi Chun. With a gust of wind under his feet, he walked over. Wu Zongming was slightly excited as he said, Group 3 and Group 7's platforms are one after the other. Let's just stay here. But I'm a little nervous now. Look, the people in the VIP seats are all important people. Even your father is here. Yi Chun followed his gaze and saw his father, Yi Tianhao, and his mother, Shun Yuqing, in the VIP seats. Yi Tianhao and Shun Yuqing smiled at Yi Chun. Their eyes were filled with expectation and pride. They had never thought that Yi Chun would be able to join the Sky Cloud Martial School's inner disciple ranking competition. Even if he could join, he would be at the bottom. But now it was different. They already knew that Yi Chun had reached the mid-condensing reality realm, plus his talent in martial arts, he should be able to get into the top 200. Yi Chun gave them a reassuring look before withdrawing his gaze. At this time, the inner court disciples were basically all here, only the top 10 inner court disciples were still missing. Suddenly, the outer sect disciples in the spectator stands burst into cheers that soared to the sky. The top 10 inner disciples are here. The one in the middle should be Blood Shadow Blade Brother Mengchong, right? Next to Brother Mengchong is Iron Fan Brother I Ching, Brother Xiao Yi, Sister Zhou, and Brother Pei Xiaoqing. So powerful. Just like the others, the inner disciples who had arrived earlier all looked at the 10 people at the wide entrance. These 10 people were the top 10 inner disciples. Some of them were arrogant and overflowing with killing intent. Some of them were 2 meters tall and looked like ancient demonic beasts. Some of them had a smile on their faces and looked calm. Some of them had a face like a peach blossom and had a lithe body. Some of them were expressionless and had cold eyes. As the 10 of them walked together, an indistinct, earth-shaking aura spread out, attracting the attention of the important figures in the VIP seats. So powerful, just the aura alone is enough to overwhelm people. Wu Zongming gasped. Yi Chun smiled faintly, he didn't feel anything. He looked around and found that most of the people had lost their confidence and unnaturally looked away. Of course, there were also a small number of people who had excited expressions in their eyes. As long as he could beat them, they would be able to become the top 10 inner disciples. What was the purpose of a man's life? Wasn't it just for pride? Who did not want to be powerful and be admired by others? And the top 10 inner disciples were the best starting point. Because the platforms were in different directions, the top 10 inner disciples all spread out. On Yi Chen's side there was flying in the wind Feng Ping, Madman Xiao Yi, and also Zhou Ruo, who was also one of the top 10 inner disciples. There was a total of 3 people. They were 3 steps away from each other, not too far away but not too close either. I don't think there are any powerful inner disciples on our side. Feng Ping looked around and said to Xiao Yi and Zhou Ruo. Xiao Ye's long hair was draped over his shoulders. He looked extremely wild. They are still too young. In the past 5 years, the most unpopular one was only 3 disciples who got kicked out of the ranking. Normally, it would be good if 2 disciples got kicked out. Feng Ping looked away from Yi Chan and the others. He did not pay too much attention to them. After all, without reaching the late condensing reality realm, there was basically no way one could get into the top 10. In the past 5 years, there was only one core disciple, Su Jing, that freak. Even the hidden fragrance sword Zhu Mei got the title of top 10 inner disciples when she was only at the late condensing reality realm, and then became a core disciple. Zhou Ruo, whose face was like a peach blossom, said lightly, "Don't be too careless, you might fail miserably. The Sky Cloud Martial School might have a second sister, Su Jing." Wu Zongming said to Yi Chan in a low voice, "You didn't see the ranking competition 2 years ago. Sister Su Jing won all the battles with her mid-condensing reality realm cultivation, and became the top 10 inner disciples. When she becomes a core disciple, then Brother Mengchong, the Blood Shadow Blade, will have the chance to be the top 10 inner disciples." Yi Chun nodded. He had never seen the full extent of Su Jing's power. Even in the Northwest Plain, she did not use all of her power. It was hard to imagine how powerful she really was. The top 10 inner disciples were not easy to deal with. Each of them had the power to kill warriors at the same level as them within seconds. It would be very difficult, almost impossible, to beat them. Wu Zongming changed his tone and said, "But Brother Mengchong, the Blood Shadow Blade, was not that powerful the year before. It was only last year that he started to show his power, and no one could stop him. Some people said that he was already in the top 10 of the core disciples, and only after the ranking competition, he would be able to challenge the core disciples." While the two were talking, the head elder of the Sky Cloud Martial School flew onto the platform in the center. Clearing his throat, the head elder raised his voice and said, "Everyone, welcome to the annual Sky Cloud Martial School's Inner Disciple Ranking Competition. This year's ranking competition is the same as the previous years. There will be 10 groups, and each group will have a seated contestant with a number of 0. They will participate in the group competition after 5 rounds, and all the previous rounds will be considered as wins. The competition will be done by drawing lots randomly. The 2 people whose numbers are drawn will have to fight on the platform to determine the winner. Also, the competition will be based on a point system. You will get 2 points for a win, 1 point for a draw, and 0 for a loss. The top 3 in the group will have the right to compete in the finals for the top 10 inner disciples." Let's cut to the chase. The ranking competition officially begins. As soon as the head elder finished speaking, the entire martial field became noisy again, and the sound waves reached the sky. Nodding with satisfaction, the head elder flashed back to the Sky Cloud Martial School's elder seats. Next to the platform, the deacons had already started to draw lots. The first group, number 3 against number 9. The second group, number 5 against number 23. The third group, hearing the head elder, all the inner disciples walked onto their respective platforms and started to fight with their opponents. Chapter 105. Coincidentally, Wu Zongming's opponent in the first battle of Group 3 was also at the mid-condensing reality realm, just like him. Burning Fist. On the stage, Wu Zongming yelled. He jumped up and threw a punch at his opponent. Boom! Hot sparks flew everywhere. The inner disciple was pushed back a couple of steps. After gaining the upper hand with only one move, Wu Zongming did not stop there. He performed his top-rank Mortal Realm skill, Flame Desolate Fist, to its limit. Dozens of fiery fist shadows spread out like a peacock's tail, causing his opponent to have no chance to fight back. After getting off the stage, Wu Zongming said casually, "Not bad, the first opponent is not that strong. It's only the first round, don't show too much of your power." Yi Chan reminded his opponent, "I know, don't worry. A battle would usually end in the time it takes for a fifth of an incense stick to burn. Rarely would 2 people be at the same level, and it would be hard to tell who would win." Some groups' battles ended quickly, and the second battle of the first round had already started. Group 7, number 8 against number 28. Wu Zongming said, "Yi Chan, it's your turn." "Yeah." Yi Chan nodded and jumped onto the stage of Group 7. Peak of the mid-condensing reality realm, my luck is not bad. Yi Chen's opponent was a teenager with straight eyebrows. He was holding a huge ringed blade. The blade was surrounded by a yellow qi flow. It looked extremely heavy. Yi Chan was speechless. His opponent was also at the peak of the mid-condensing reality realm. Why was he so lucky? Lose. The teenager with straight eyebrows suddenly rushed forward. The hard rock under his feet suddenly cracked. The huge ringed blade in his hands drew a thick arc in the air, directly attacking towards Yi Chan. Yi Chan shook his head. He casually waved his right hand. His whole arm was so fast that it left no shadow. It easily knocked away his opponent's huge ringed blade. His opponent thought that the blade was in his hand. He was about to attack again. Who? The two were 5 steps away from each other. The teenager with straight eyebrows did not have a blade. He said in frustration, "Where is my blade?" Yi Chan pointed to his left. The teenager with straight eyebrows looked over. His huge ringed blade was stuck on the edge of the stage. It was shaking. He did not have the face to stay on the stage anymore. He pulled out his blade and jumped off the stage with a red face. He hated Yi Chan to death. He made him lose face like this. Unsurprisingly, Yi Chan won one battle. He got 2 points. Then came the second round, the third round, and all the way to the 5th round, where Yi Chan easily defeated his opponents without much effort. His score had reached 10 points. Wu Zongming lost one battle in the 4th round. He got 8 points. On the other side, Zhang Haoren was in the 10th group. He had broken through to the mid-condensing reality realm a while ago, and he had also won 5 battles in a row, gaining 10 points. On the other hand, Huang Binguen, who had battled with Yi Chan before, seemed to have improved. He had only lost 1 out of the 5 battles, and had accumulated 8 points just like Wu Zongming. After the 5 rounds of competition had ended, the Great Elder announced a half-an-hour break, allowing everyone to recover their true qi and physical strength. On the eastern side of the VIP seats, Yi Tianhao smiled at Shen Yuqing and said, Chenier is doing well. He actually won 5 matches in a row, and it looks like he's having it easy. Shen Yuqing was also very happy. He said, we were worried for nothing. In the past 6 months, Chenier's progress is extraordinary. There's hope for him to enter the top 100. Indeed, let's wait and see. The half-hour break was over, and the competition continued. Unlike the first 5 rounds, the last 5 rounds would have seeded players joining the fray. If you didn't meet them, you could count yourself lucky, but if you did, you could only brace yourself and fight. This time, Wu Zhongming was really unlucky. Although he did not run into any seeded contestants, he ran into an inner disciple who was at the late condensing reality realm. After a dozen attacks, he was defeated. Zhang Haoran continued his winning streak, accumulating 12 points. Huang Bingguan lost 1 match, but he still had 8 points. The 7th battle of the 6th round, it was Yi Chen's turn again. Hee little brat, your winning streak ends here. The one who spoke was a young man with squinted eyes. He was about 17 or 18 years old, which was a bit older than most of the inner disciples. He had accumulated a lot of battle experience over the years, and could usually be ranked around 100. Shoo! This time Yi Chen took the initiative to attack. He performed his crane shadow steps and disappeared from his opponent's sight. When he saw Yi Chen again, he felt a sharp pain in his chest. The strong fist power had pushed him off the ground and out of the stage. He fell heavily on the ground. The squinted young man could not believe what he had just seen. How is this possible? He defeated me with only 1 attack? How powerful is he? Feng Ping, this disciple is not simple. It seems like he has been hiding his true power. Zhou Rua glanced at Yi Chen and said to Feng Ping. Feng Ping shook his head and laughed. Compared to the other inner disciples, he is indeed a lot more powerful. But against me, he can only lose. Xiao Yi grinned. Although he is not your opponent, he still has a chance to enter the top 3 in the group. After another round, it was the 9th round. Number 0 versus number 24. It's your turn. Xiao Yi crossed his arms in front of his chest and said, whoosh! A light wind swept across and Feng Ping's shadow was blown away. When he looked again, he was already on the stage. Such a fast technique. When did he get on the stage? He is indeed the flying in the wind Feng Ping. His movement is almost like the wind, invisible and formless. All the inner disciples looked at each other. Yi Chen frowned. Although Feng Ping's speed was unbelievably fast, what was really scary was that he could blend in with the wind. Once he combined the two, his Qinggong would have a qualitative improvement, and it would give people an illusion that they could not understand. Of course, that did not include him. Brother Feng, my name is Gao Liang. Nice to meet you. The square-faced young man knew the difference in power between them, so he said respectfully. Feng Ping nodded. Bring it on. I will not go too far. Hearing him, the square-faced young man's face turned serious. He took out his sword from the scabbard and swung it in the air towards Feng Ping. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. The sword vibrated in the air, and 4 sword shadows appeared. Each sword shadow was extremely sharp, and they cut the air into pieces. Seeing that the tip of the sword was about to hit Feng Ping, the square-faced young man's face flashed with joy. At this moment, Feng Ping moved, his body leaned back, and kept the same distance from the tip of the sword as he floated backwards. How is this possible? My sword's speed is not as fast as his movement technique. After chasing for more than 10 steps, the square-faced young man still could not hit his opponent, and his expression changed drastically. Feng Ping was not interested in playing with his opponent anymore, so he flicked his finger on the tip of the sword. Chin! With a light flick, the square-faced young man could barely hold the sword in his hand. The sword light that he had just condensed was instantly shattered, and his plan to attack through the air had failed. Immediately after, he was kicked in the chest, and blood came out from the corner of his mouth as he flew backwards. Brother Feng is too powerful. Feng Yan has been winning all this time, but he was still defeated so easily. Just how powerful are the top 10 inner disciples? Very powerful. Brother Feng did not even use his full strength. Looks like no one in our group can beat Brother Feng. That number 28 Yi Chen is definitely not Brother Feng's opponent. Chapter 106. Below the stage, Wu Zongming turned his head and said to Yi Qian, "Yi Qian, you have to be careful if you run into senior brother Feng. His qinggong is more than that." "I know, don't worry." Among the people present, Yi Qian could see it more clearly than anyone else. However, in terms of qinggong, he really did not need to be afraid of the other party. In the 7th round, Wu Zongming, Zhang Haoran, and Huang Bingguan all lost. Wu Zongming and Huang Bingguan lost because their strength was limited, so they naturally lost when encountering a strong opponent, while Zhang Haoran lost because he encountered one of the top 10 inner disciples, Ghost Sword Li Kuang. Ghost Sword Li Kuang was indeed worthy of the title of Ghost Sword. With just one sword move, Zhang Haoran was defeated. Seriously speaking, the difference in strength between the two wasn't that big. After all, Zhang Haoran was one of the top geniuses in the entire Sky Cloud Martial School, so it was impossible for him to be defeated in one move. However, he could only blame his bad luck. Ghost Sword Li Kuang's sword art was famous for its unpredictability. As long as one's strength was slightly weaker, it would be very difficult for them to withstand even one move. That sword was like a nightmare. There was no way to block it. Zhang Haoran, who had lost the match, stared at Ghost Sword Li Kuang. He couldn't believe that he couldn't even block a single sword. Ghost Sword Li Kuang turned around and said as he walked down the stage, "One more year." Under the core disciples, senior brother Li Kuang is the #1 swordsman. Now that I think about it, I feel that the sword was too terrifying. My eyes couldn't keep up, my senses couldn't keep up, and even my intuition couldn't keep up. It was clearly very fast, but it gave people the illusion that it was very slow. If it were me, I would probably go crazy immediately. Senior brother Li Kuang is powerful, but look over there. An inner disciple pointed at a platform where two people were fighting. The others discussed among themselves. It's one of the top 10 inner disciples. Ranked 9th, dual spear Dong Haohua, senior brother Dong. Who is his opponent? I've never seen him before. Me too. He seems to have appeared out of nowhere. Is there such a person among the inner disciples? On a platform, the cold young man was expressionless. He placed his right hand on the hilt of his sword, pulled it out and slashed. Chi! 6 sword lights floated over and covered Dong Haohua's entire body. Dong Haohua smiled confidently. He brandished the 2 spears that were 5 feet long. The spear shadows that filled the air easily shattered the sword light and rushed towards his opponent. Suddenly, Dong Haohua stood rooted to the ground. He lowered his head and saw that the clothes on his chest had been torn open, and a faint trace of blood was seeping out. "I lost. What's your name?" Dong Haohua knew that if his opponent hadn't been merciful, this sword would have taken his life. However, he didn't understand. He had clearly destroyed 6 sword shadows, so how could he still be hit? It was like seeing a ghost. "Li Yun." With these 2 words, the cold-looking youth walked down the stage. He defeated senior brother Dong Haohua, who is ranked 9th with 1 sword strike. This is unbelievable. When did such a terrifying figure appear among the inner sect disciples? Even senior brother Dong was defeated in 1 move. This Li Yun should be able to compete with senior brother Li Kuang. I wonder whose sword art is better. Not far away, Ghost Sword Li Kuang squinted his eyes and stared at Li Yun's back. Finally, one of the top 10 inner disciples had been defeated. A lot of people who were not powerful enough did not have much hope for themselves, but they hoped to see a second or even a third. Before the first wave had even subsided, another wave had risen. On the 8th platform, another person had defeated the 10th ranked inner disciple, Iron Leg Song Fei. Although Song Fei was only ranked 10th, that was because his fighting style was too tough. If he fought head-on, his ranking would still be higher. On the other hand, Song Fei's opponent also specialized in leg techniques. He only threw out 3 kicks. The first kick scattered Song Fei's leg shadows, the second kick shattered Song Fei's protective Zhan Qi, and the third kick landed lightly on Song Fei's chest, leaving a footprint. Song Fei's kick was so light that it seemed natural. If it was just that, it would not have caused such a sensation. The inner disciple who had defeated Song Fei was called Tai Feng. He was 19 years old this year, and he was one of the oldest disciples in the Sky Cloud Martial School. Everyone knew that he was hardworking, but his talent was average. However, after watching his battle this time, he gave people the feeling that he was a master. It was as if he had changed from a moth to a butterfly. This kid is a late bloomer. On the elder seats and elder side. A few elders on the side nodded. Diligence can make up for one's lack of talent. Moreover, when he is extremely diligent, he will be able to understand many things that others cannot. This kid needs to be trained. It is not that I have never seen late bloomers before, but this time it is more shocking than any of the previous ones. It is like he has been reborn. Wu Zhongming asked Yi-chan, what did you see? Why do I feel that those 3 kicks were ordinary, but the strange thing is that senior brother Songfei could not block them? Yi-chan slowly let out a breath. That is power. Power. Wu Zhongming did not understand. Yi-chan explained, the so-called power is very mysterious, and words cannot describe it. To put it simply, he has understood the power of nature, and has integrated this power into his kick art. Therefore, although it looks ordinary, it is unstoppable. After all, in front of the power of nature, human strength is too small. Wu Zhongming did not really understand. As the competition went on, the higher the score, the lower the score. So far, Yi-chan had 18 points, tied with Feng Zhongfei and Feng Ping for first place. Finally, it was the last round of the competition, the 10th round. The first round, number 0 against number 28. As soon as the deacon finished speaking, the inner disciples on Yi-chan's side became excited. In the previous 9 rounds, they could already see that Yi-chan was very powerful. After all, in the 10 groups, there were very few people who could win 9 rounds in a row. Besides the 8 seated contestants, there were only a few others who could do so. Originally, if Yi-chan did not run into Feng Ping, he might be able to win 10 rounds in a row and tie with Feng Ping for first place. But now it was probably impossible. Under everyone's disbelief, Yi-chan walked onto the stage. On the other side, Feng Ping said casually, "You are not bad. You are not bad either." What Yi-chan said shocked everyone else. Brother Feng Ping's power is only not bad? Are you kidding me? You can't be so arrogant. Being too arrogant is not good. Let me test your bottom line. Feng Ping recognized Yi-chan's power, but he did not think that Yi-chan could beat him. His body flashed and he disappeared, as if he had merged with the wind. Yi-chan did not change his expression. He waved his fist to the left, and the fist power and finger power clashed together, making a horrifying explosion sound. However, after that, Feng Ping's attacks became even fiercer. Finger power after finger power shrouded Yi-chan from all directions, and he still did not show himself. In terms of movement techniques, I have never been afraid of anyone. As he spoke, Yi-chan's body disappeared as well. Finger power after finger power turned the stage into a hornet's nest. Pa Bangqi. On the stage, only fist shadows and finger power could be seen fighting. Because the two's bodies were too fast, and because it was too strange, only a trace of shadow could be seen. This is too fucking strange. How can we watch this? I did not expect this Yi-chan to be so powerful. He was obviously hiding his power before. Someone could not help but say, Brother Feng Ping did not use his real power, right? Chapter 107. Feng Ping did not hear the discussions below the stage. He was completely shocked. Among the inner disciples, there was actually someone who did not lose to him in terms of Qinggong. It's urgent. Feng Ping pointed out with his finger. The air was filled with finger light. The finger light tore through the air, and the sound was endless. Puff 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 puff. Yi-chan's body was instantly pierced through and scattered. It turned out that it was just an afterimage. Your Qinggong is just as Yi-chan's voice came from behind Feng Ping. Feng Ping was furious. His body was like a tornado, spinning violently. Countless finger light beams shot out in all directions. Some of them even pierced through the stone pillars at the edge of the stage. Yi-chan's eyes were sharp, his body flashed, shuttling through the countless finger light beams. They were not shot at the same time. There were always some in front and some behind, some fast and some slow. With his powerful body control and speed, Yi-chan was able to sneak in and out of Feng Ping's space. He managed to get within 5 steps of Feng Ping. How is this possible? How can we not hit him like this? Including Xiao Yi and Zhou Ruo, all the inner disciples below the stage were stunned. Their mouths were slightly open. Those with good eyesight knew that it was impossible to dodge all the finger light beams with just speed. After all, the difference between each finger light beam was very small, so small that it could be ignored. Plus, these finger light beams were not arranged in any order. There was no way to find a pattern. In order to pass through them, one's eyesight, heart power, stamina, speed, reflexes, and the ability to see the big picture all had to be at a high level. On the elder seats, the head elder had a smile on his face. This disciple is not bad. There are not many people who can beat Fengping in Qinggong. The second elder nodded. Fengping's movement skill is not to be underestimated, but he is still not as experienced as his opponent. He is also not as skilled. Haha, there are 3 disciples with potential. It is our Sky Cloud Martial School's fortune. The third elder could not help but laugh out loud. On the stage, Yichun threw out a punch, blowing away Fengping without hesitation. Yichun wins. The deacon who drew the lots was startled. He shouted out loud. Yichun was not too pleased with himself. His body slid and he instantly landed beside Wu Zongming. Wu Zongming's blood was boiling as he watched. He said excitedly, "That's great. Even senior brother Fengping's Qinggong can't match up to yours." He is still unable to comprehend the true essence of the wind. He only has the speed of the wind. Wind was formless and formless. If Fengping could comprehend it, Yichun's Qinggong would naturally not be able to catch up to him. Fengping walked down the stage in a daze. Losing to someone else in Qinggong was a huge blow to him. After all, he was full of confidence earlier and thought that he could easily defeat Yichun. The 10th round of the competition ended. The deacon who drew lots reported the score. Group 7, first place Yichun 20 points, second place Fengping 18 points, third place. The top 3 teams in the group stage would qualify for the finals. Fengping was not eliminated. Soon the top 3 of the other groups were also announced. Wu Zongming lost too many matches and was disqualified from the finals. Zhang Haoran only lost 1 match and was ranked 2nd. As for Li Yun and Taifeng, they were both ranked 1st in their groups. No matter how exciting the competition was, they still needed to eat. It was already noon. The first elder stood up and announced that the finals would begin in the afternoon. In the Sky Cloud Martial School's Inner Disciples Cafeteria. I can't believe there are 3 powerful inner disciples this year. Li Yun, Taifeng, and Yichun. Li Yun's sword art is too powerful. I still can't figure out how he defeated senior brother Dong Haohua. Taifeng is not bad either. He defeated senior brother Song Fei with just 3 kicks. Steady as a mountain. What do you guys think? Other than his Qinggong, what do you think about Yichun? Maybe his Qinggong is good. But to beat him, one must be in the top 6 of the top 10 inner disciples. Yeah, no matter how good his Qinggong is, if he does not have enough attack power, he will not be able to defeat senior brother Li Kuang and the others. Yeah. Other than Fengping, Dong Haohua, and Song Fei, the other 7 haven't revealed their full strength. They haven't even revealed 70% of their strength. It'll be very difficult to win against them. We can't be too weak in every aspect. Don't say anymore. I will be so excited that I can't eat anymore. I really want to see the finals. At that time, the top 10 inner disciples will definitely go all out. It will be the peak of the inner disciples. In the afternoon, the martial arts plaza was boiling again. It was several times more lively than in the morning. On the central platform, the first elder raised his voice and said, "The finals will be divided into the elimination round and the ranking round. The elimination round will eliminate 20 people, leaving only 10. And the ranking round will decide the ranking of this year's top 10 inner disciples." Below, Yichun heard it clearly. The elimination round had a total of 10 rounds divided into 3 platforms, but each platform did not have a fixed number of people. In other words, whoever was drawn would go up, and it was possible to choose which platform to go up. After the 10 rounds, the top 10 disciples would become this year's top 10 inner disciples. After becoming one of the top 10 inner disciples, there was still the ranking round, which was the most complicated. It needed a lot of rounds, so let's not talk about it for now. Now the finals officially begin. The first elder gathered his zhanqi and raised his voice. Boom! The spectator stands were filled with cheers. Everyone was supporting the inner disciple they liked. The first platform, Song Fei against Zhang Hao. The second platform, Li Yun against Wu Yuan. The third platform, Meng Chong against Fengping. There was no suspense in the battles between the first and second platform, but the third platform was more interesting. After all, this was the battle between the top 10 inner disciples. It immediately caused a tsunami of cheers. 6 people went up on the platform. Unsurprisingly, Song Fei and Li Yun easily defeated their opponents and got 2 points. The battle on the third platform had not yet started. Feng Ping looked at Meng Chong seriously. As one of the top 10 inner disciples, there were two people he did not want to meet the most. One was the ghost sword Li Kuang, and the other was the blood shadow blade Meng Chong. The ghost sword Li Kuang's sword art was unpredictable. It was impossible to defend against. If one's strength was slightly weaker, there was almost no way they could pose a threat to him, but Meng Chong was even more terrifying. He had an overwhelming advantage in all aspects. It was almost impossible to meet him. However, Feng Ping still wanted to walk past Meng Chong's blade no matter what. He was still one of the top 10 inner disciples. If he was defeated by someone with one blade, he would lose face. Meng Chong grinned and said, "Feng Ping, are you thinking about how to walk past my blade? Give up on that idea. Your strength is too far away from mine." Meng Chong walked towards Feng Ping step by step. His right hand was placed on the blade's hilt. Dodge! Feng Ping's scalp went numb. He quickly dashed to the side. His body instantly disappeared. You can't escape. Almost no one saw how Meng Chong used his blade. They only saw the blood-red blade light flash past. The next moment, Feng Ping's figure appeared. There was a long and narrow blade mark on his chest, extending all the way to his waist. Haha! After laughing a few times, Meng Chong turned around and walked down the platform. Chapter 108. So powerful. So powerful. Even brother Feng Ping could not take one attack from him. Although senior brother Feng Ping lost to Yi Chan, his movement art is still one of the best among the inner disciples. But he couldn't even dodge a single blade attack from senior brother Meng Chong. The gap between them is huge. This year, brother Meng Chong is even more powerful than last year. Hearing the discussions from the crowd, Yi Chan frowned slightly. The blood shadow blade Meng Chong was indeed very powerful. His blade art was very simple. It was fast, accurate, and brutal. There was nothing fancy about it. But in his hands, it was able to bring out the power that even gods and ghosts would have to run away from. When fighting against him, if one's technique was not at a certain level, one should not try to use techniques. Otherwise, one would die a horrible death. The second Meng Chong got off the stage, the top 10 inner disciples all looked at him with fear. The skinny Iron Fan I Ching forced a smile. I thought I could catch up with him this year. But it seems like I have been left behind. Next to him, Song Fei was surprised. I Ching, you were ranked second last year? What's the point of being ranked second? The gap is too big. He has already reached the top of the core disciples. Top of the core disciples. Song Fei gasped. He knew very well how powerful the top-ranked core disciples were. Although they were all at the late condensing reality realm or even the peak of the late condensing reality realm, the slightly more powerful core disciples could easily beat him with only one attack. Not to mention the top-ranked core disciples, they were the top of the top-ranked core disciples. The fourth battle was Yi Chen's turn. His opponent was called Yang Lai. Once he got on the stage, Yang Lai backed off as far as he could. He wanted to increase the distance between him and Yi Chan. He was afraid that Yi Chan would suddenly disappear in front of him. Yi Chan shook his head and forced a smile. He stood still. When he was 30 steps away, Yang Lai stopped backing off. He held his long blade with both of his hands and threw out 3 blade lights towards Yi Chen's position. Yi Chan moved his body slightly and skillfully dodged the blade lights. He stomped his feet on the ground and released his hidden power. Explode! Boom! The stage under Yang Lai's feet exploded. His body was thrown high into the air and fell off the stage. This was out of everyone's expectations. They had thought that Yi Chan would defeat his opponent with speed. They hadn't expected this to happen. The fifth match was against Zhang Haoran. Although he lost to Ghost Sword Li Kuang, his strength was still very strong. In less than 10 moves, he defeated his opponent and gained 2 points. There was no suspense in the 6th, 7th, and 8th matches. It was just pure abuse, not interesting at all. The 9th battle, Pei Xiaoqing vs. Tai Feng. Buzz. As soon as the lot-drawing deacon's voice fell, the crowd finally boiled over. Pei Xiaoqing was ranked above Ghost Sword Li Kuang in the previous tournament. He had a friendly attitude and seemed to be easy to get along with. Only those who knew him knew that he was like a demon when he made a move. Even Li Kuang was afraid of this friend of his. Tai Feng was the representative of late bloomers. He had defeated Song Fei, who was famous for his leg techniques, in 3 kicks. He had the demeanor of a master and was as steady as a mountain. The two of them could be said to be at loggerheads. If they didn't fight, it would be hard to tell who was stronger and who was weaker. Taifeng, you have to show mercy later, Pei Xiaoqing said with a smile. Taifeng replied honestly, okay. Nobody knew why, but when they saw Taifeng's expression, everyone wanted to laugh. A knowing smile. This person was not hateful at all, they only admired him, admired his hard work, admired his perseverance, and even more admired his simple and honest, grandmaster-like bearing. Hearing this, Pei Xiaoqing's smile disappeared and his heart tightened. His intuition told him that Taifeng was not easy to deal with. If he wanted to win, he would have to use 120% of his strength. Unknowingly, Pei Xiaoqing's palms had turned purple, like a demon. He shouted loudly and pounced towards Taifeng with a palm strike. Woo 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 woo. The air was torn apart, emitting a mournful sound. Some of the nearby inner disciples' faces turned pale with fright. Taifeng's expression was still simple, but when he moved, everyone knew that he was not easy to deal with. The pressure from the aura had no effect on him at all. His body slightly tilted and his right leg raised. With just two simple movements, Taifeng's aura changed. A powerful aura gathered and integrated into his body. Break! With a single kick, Pei Xiaoqing's palm power was disintegrated. The huge impact forced him to stop his momentum. However, as one of the top 10 inner disciples in the last inner disciple competition, Pei Xiaoqing naturally still had energy to spare. His body circled around Taifeng and suddenly launched a second wave of attack. Demons appear all over the mountains and plains. Ooh! Roar roar roar. The purple and cyan palm wind was like a dark cloud, covering the sky and covering the earth as it moved towards Taifeng. If it was someone else, they would have broken their mind before the fight even started. This time Taifeng is in danger. Brother Pei Xiaoqing is not Song Fei after all. How could he be so easy to deal with? I wonder how many moves Taifeng can take. Yichun had a different opinion from the others. After Taifeng's first kick, his aura had already gathered and the one in danger was Pei Xiaoqing. Just as expected. Facing the sky full of cyan palm wind, Taifeng put his tongue under his chin and let out a loud shout. His shout was like thunder, causing the air to ripple like water. One kick moves the wind and clouds, sweeping the world. Standing in the middle of the platform, Taifeng's aura was limitless as he kicked out. This kick caused a strong wind to descend on the martial arts plaza. Accompanied by the majestic power of the kick, it went towards the cyan palm wind. Pop! Pop! The sound of thunder came out, the whole platform was in chaos, people could not look directly at it. The next moment, a figure was sent flying backward, spurting out a large mouthful of blood in the air. It was Pei Xiaoqing. Unbelievable, Taifeng won. How many kicks did Taifeng use? Did you guys see it? It looks like it has 5 legs but also 9 legs. Why did I only see the shadows of his kicks? Yichun smiled lightly. This Taifeng was very powerful, and there were not many people who could beat him. Judging from the current situation, only the Blood Shadow Blade Mengchong had the power to suppress him. But of course, in a battle between warriors anything could happen, and the more powerful one might not necessarily win. The elders in the elder seating area looked at each other and smiled. The late bloomer Taifeng was even more outstanding than they had imagined. That move just now was simply too brilliant. The wind stopped and Taifeng, who was on the platform, smiled and walked down the platform. Everyone could only feel speechless towards this, and they wondered if he was really simple and honest or if he was pretending to be. Then the competition continued. There were no strong fights like before. The next few matches were all won by overwhelming margins, without any suspense. However, in the last match of the first round, Yi Qing the Iron Fan made everyone happy. He waved his fan and countless shadows of his fan danced like dancing butterflies. His opponent did not dare to fight anymore and immediately surrendered. Chapter 109. The second round of the competition was a bit speechless. Out of the 15 battles, 11 of them ended very quickly. Almost all of them were the top-ranked disciples beating the bottom-ranked disciples. Yi Qin's battle was not included in these 11 battles, but it was not that far off. His opponent was Dong Haohua, who was not weak at all. Unfortunately, it was Yi-chan who had beaten him within 3 to 4 attacks before he had even shown his real power. There were 2 exciting battles in the third round. The first was a duel between the only 2 female disciples among the top 10 inner disciples of the previous term. The other was Xiao Yi against Li Yun. The 2 female disciples were Peach Hand, Zhou Ruo, and Rainbow Sword Qiu Ruotong. Zhou Ruo was ranked 4th. She was very strong. Her slender hands looked like they had no bones, but after being touched by her, Qiu Ruotong, who was ranked 8th, immediately vomited blood and retreated, losing the battle. Xiao Yi and Li Yun's battle was too intense. One of them was ranked 3rd among the top 10 inner disciples last time. The other one was a new rising star. Both of them did not give in to each other. They were fighting fiercely, even the platform was almost destroyed by them. Xiao Ye's defense and attacking power were very scary. Normal sword light could not break through his Zhanqi protection. One punch could explode the air in front of him, making Li Yun unable to get close to him. As for Li Yun, although he was a new rising star, he was not any weaker than Xiao Yi. He was evenly matched with the 3rd-ranked Xiao Yi. His sword light splitting martial technique was perfect. The hidden sword light made Xiao Yi even more scared. In the end, the head elder thought that it was too long, so he called it a draw. There were also exciting battles in the 4th and 5th round. The outer disciples who were watching were very excited. Their blood was boiling. The 6th round, the 3rd battle. Blood Shadow Blade Meng Chong against Iron Fan Yi Qing. Last year's 1st and 2nd ranked disciples are finally fighting. I wonder who is stronger. You idiot! It must be senior brother Meng Chong. The battle has not even started. How do you know? Senior brother Yi Qing's fan art is so amazing. How could he lose? The one who supported Yi Qing was a female inner disciple. The people beside her rolled their eyes, thinking, another love-struck fool. On the stage, Yi Qing opened his iron fan and smiled at Meng Chong. Last year when I fought with you, I was able to last more than 10 rounds. I'm afraid I won't be able to last this year. Meng Chong said, there is no need to belittle yourself. Do you think that I will let down my guard against you? Yi Qing laughed. Come on, I know you definitely have some ultimate moves, and there's an 80% chance you're going to use them against me. Meng Chong still had his eyes on Yi Qing. His opponent had already fused his techniques and actual combat to perfection. He looked beautiful but not flashy. It would be impossible to defeat him with a single slash. Step by step, Meng Chong walked toward Yi Qing. Just as he was about to take his 10th step, Yi Qing moved. In fact, he had no choice but to move. Otherwise, once his opponent found the most suitable place to attack, there would be no room for him to turn things around. The iron fan fluttered up and down, creating a series of illusory fan shadows that flew towards Meng Chong without any pattern. It was as if a large bag filled with butterflies had been accidentally opened, and all the butterflies had flown out. Break! Meng Chong lowered his body and charged forward, slashing down with his saber. Poochie! This saber strike grabbed the weakest point of the countless fan shadows, breaking through them. The blood-red saber gleam easily slashed towards Yi Qing at an unbelievable speed. This is what a fast saber should be like. Once it moves, it's amazing. I wonder what level that North Snow Quicksaber Lynch has reached. Seeing Meng Chong's saber art, Yi-chan couldn't help but think of Lynch, who he had met in the Northwest Auction House. Both of them were famous for their fast saber arts. If Meng Chong was already this powerful, then that Lynch would be even more powerful. Shaking his head, Yi-chan knew that he had to work harder. Above Lynch, there were still young Master North Snow and young Master Duanmu, and above him, there was the top young warrior of the Windy Nation, young Master Emerald. Clang! The blood-red saber light was blocked by the iron fan. Yi Qing's body was knocked back by the impact. Good, since you can take my first saber attack, you can definitely take my second and third. Meng Chong was excited. The blood-red saber light crisscrossed in the air, covering Yi Qing like a huge net. Yi Qing tried his best to protect his body with the iron fan. But even so, that horrifying saber light still numbed his entire body and made his blood boil. The 7th saber attack. This saber attack was launched last, but it was faster than the previous few saber lights and cut open Yi Qing's hairband. Yi Qing's long black hair danced in the air as he put away his iron fan. I still can't beat you. Just now, he had already used his ace attacks. However, under Meng Chong's saber light, those ace attacks were not as good as his normal attacks. He understood that this was because his ace attacks were not perfect yet. Otherwise, it would not be so easy for Meng Chong to find the flaws in his attacks. However, everything has its pros and cons. After this battle, it would be easier for him to find the flaws in his attacks. Meng Chong laughed and said, "Being able to force me to use the 7th saber attack is already very good." Beside Yi-chan, Wu Zongming sighed and said, "I wonder who can beat brother Meng Chong?" After saying this, he glanced at Yi-chan. Yi-chan gave him a mysterious feeling. Even now, he still did not know Yi-chan's real power. Maybe there was a chance. Of course, Wu Zongming was not sure. Let's keep watching. Yi-chan did not make any assumptions. Soon the 6th round ended. Until now, there were only 5 people who had an undefeated record. They were Blood Shadow Blade Meng Chong, Peach Blossom Hand Zhou Ruo, Ghost Sword Li Kuang, Tai Feng and Yi-chan. Although Madman Xiao Yi and Li Yun did not lose, they had a draw after all. They had lost 1 point. After the 7th round, there was one less person who had an undefeated record. It was Peach Blossom Hand Zhou Ruo. He was unlucky and met Iron Fan Yi Qing. After exchanging hundreds of moves, he was defeated by Yi Qing. Although he lost, his power still made the crowd fear him. In the crowd's anticipation, the 8th round began. The first 3 rounds could barely be considered exciting. When it came to the 4th round, the crowd burst into cheers. The contestants on the stage were Yi-chan and Ghost Sword Li Kuang. If it were in the morning, the crowd would definitely not be cheering like this. However, Yi-chan had been winning all the time, and his popularity had skyrocketed. He had gained a lot of supporters, including some of the inner disciples. On the VIP seats, Yi Tianhao and Shen Yuqing's breathing almost stopped. It was not an exaggeration to say that this year's Sky Cloud Martial School's inner disciple ranking competition was one of the most thrilling events in their lives. Every time Yi-chan stepped onto the stage, they would be on tenterhooks for a while, afraid to see Yi-chan fail. Although Yi-chan's results had already made them very satisfied, who wouldn't want their children to do better? Fortunately, up until now they had seen Yi-chan win again and again, and it seemed to be quite easy. But now it was different. Yi-chan's opponent was the mysterious Ghost Sword Li Kuang. Whether he could win or not was still unknown. Chapter 110. I'm afraid brother Yi-chan is in danger. Senior brother Meng Chong and senior brother Li Kuang have always been able to restrain people with powerful movement techniques. Senior brother Feng Ping had been defeated by the 2 of them. Unknowingly, everyone had added the word, senior brother, behind Yi-chan's name. Yes, let's see if brother Yi-chan can block brother Li Kuang's first sword. If he can block the first sword, then he can block the second and third sword. Ghost Sword Li Kuang's sword art was unpredictable. As long as one's strength was slightly weaker, it would be difficult to block his sword. Only when one's strength surpassed the opponent's could one win. On the platform, Li Kuang's eyes were cold. His back was straight like a great sword. 30 steps away from him, Yi-chan looked indifferent and calm. I only need 1 sword to defeat an ordinary person. You are quite strong, you should be able to force me to use my 3rd sword. Li Kuang looked at Yi-chan and said coldly. Yi-chan said, really? I advise you to go all out. Do you think you can force me to go all out with your strength? Li Kuang's eyes became colder. The 2 stood 30 steps away from each other. One's eyes were cold while the other looked calm. Everyone's breathing stopped as they stared at the stage without blinking. Buzz! The storage ring emitted a faint light and the hidden cloud sword appeared in Yi-chan's hand. He said lightly, if you don't go all out, you won't have any chance of winning. Most of the people were stunned. What? Brother Yi-chan uses a sword just like brother Li Kuang. This is amazing. Brother Yi-chan didn't take the previous battles seriously at all. A battle between 2 great swordsmen, just thinking about it makes me excited. Yi-chan suddenly took out his sword. It was a huge shock to the spectators. After all, they knew that without a sword, a swordsman's battle power would be greatly reduced. Only with a sword in hand could a swordsman unleash his full strength. On the elder seats, a few elders nodded and laughed. Interesting. With the hidden cloud sword in his hand, Yi-chan's aura changed. His eyes were as sharp as a sword, capable of penetrating people's hearts. A sharp aura was emitted from his body. Li Kuang was slightly surprised. He really didn't expect Yi-chan to be a swordsman. He couldn't be blamed for not seeing through it, it was because he hid it too well. Under normal circumstances, a swordsman with some achievements would have some qualities of the sword, such as sharpness, coldness, and so on. However, Yi Chen's temperament had nothing to do with these. It looked very ordinary. Of course, he didn't know that Yi Chen had already trained his qi hiding spell to a very high level. Not only could he hide his cultivation level, he could also hide his aura, making it hard for people to see through him. Not to mention Li Kuang, even a clasping Yuan realm sword artist might not be able to see through him. Since you are also a swordsman, that's for the best. Defeating a swordsman is undoubtedly more interesting. I hope you can last longer. Li Kuang's slender right hand was placed on the hilt of his sword. Waves of true qi were injected into the sword, ready to deal a fatal blow at any time. Shoo! Li Kuang moved. His whole body was like a sharp sword that was unsheathed, rushing towards Yi Chen at an extreme speed. In the blink of an eye, the distance between the two had shortened to 5 steps. Ecstasy! Only then did Li Kuang pull out his sword. Once the sword was out of the sheath, the twisted black sword light seemed slow but was actually fast. It seemed to move from top to bottom like a nightmare, making people unable to tell where the opponent was going to attack. Zhang Haoren's face turned pale. He was defeated by this sword. The pain of not being able to use his power and not knowing what to do was still fresh in his memory. Clang! Under the nervous and excited gazes of the crowd, Yi Chen also made his move. The angle of the sword was unimaginable. It was like an antelope's horn, a divine stroke. Not only that, Yi Chen's sword light was very thin, it was the kind of thin that was condensed to the extreme, it was even sharper. Clang! Li Kuang's first sword was blocked, but he didn't care. He was about to make his second sword to suppress his opponent. But what surprised him was that Yi Chen took the initiative to counterattack. Peak of perfection. The lone peak of 13 swords was only a top-rank mortal realm sword art. But in the hands of Yi Chen it was extremely powerful. A stunning sword light pierced through the air and went straight for Li Kuang's chest. Li Kuang took a step back and slashed out with his black long sword, trying to take back the initiative. Yi Chen's eyes were sharp. He twisted his wrist and the sword light exploded in a very small area, layer upon layer, spreading out towards Li Kuang. What? The incoming sword light gave Li Kuang the feeling of a huge mountain, one after another, attacking his mind. At this moment, Li Kuang stopped underestimating Yi Chen. His body rose from the ground and slashed down. Kacha! 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 When the two sword lights collided, the platform was cut into pieces, and the hard stone pillars at the edge of the platform were cut off. This series of actions happened in the blink of an eye. Many people didn't even see how the two exchanged blows, it was so fast that it was terrifying. Such a thrilling battle. Every sword is so dangerous. There is no time to react at all. Senior brother Yi Chen is indeed powerful. He easily blocked Li Kuang's first sword and even took the initiative to counterattack. On the other side, Pei Xiaoqing and Qiu Ruodong stood together. Qiu Ruodong said, "Your friend is in danger." Pei Xiaoqing smiled confidently. "Don't underestimate Li Kuang. In the past year, his sword arts have been improving rapidly, and if I'm not wrong, he has already mastered the 7th sword of the 9 Ghost Shadow Sword. That sword is enough to defeat 3 Yi Chens, and now he has only used 3 sword moves. But I feel that Yi Chen is also not using his full power." Li Kuang's figure floated back and lightly landed on the ground. He solemnly looked at the distant Yi Chen. "I admit that you're qualified to make me go all out. However, it's still impossible for you to defeat me. I'll let you see my true strength now." Li Kuang took a step forward as a sharp qi flow burst out from his body, pouncing toward Yi Chen with an earth-shattering force. At the same time, the black sword light became extremely frightening, turning the formless qi flow into a dense black color, covering the existence of the sword light. 10,000 Ghost Soul Devour. This time Li Kuang did not hold back. He knew that the 4th, 5th, and even 6th sword attacks would not be able to do anything to Yi Chen. Only the 7th sword attack would have the confidence to defeat Yi Chen without any resistance. The black airflow swept over along with the sword light, but Yi Chen wasn't afraid. He slightly closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, his eyes were like 2 sword lights tearing through the void. Break! When Yi Chen waved his sword, all the nearby inner disciples who used swords were frightened. For no reason, the swords on their waists trembled, wanting to fly out of their sheaths and merge with Yi Chen's sword aura. No matter how they tried to suppress it, they couldn't stabilize it. Many big shots on the VIP seats exclaimed, "Sword intent! It's actually sword intent, how is this possible?"